They promised her forever, but instead, they built a stage where her heart would be publicly destroyed. In the middle of St. Patrick's Cathedral, under the eyes of 300 of New York's most powerful elites, Isabella Sinclair believed she was finally stepping into her happily ever after. Ivory silk wrapped around her curves, a custom-made gown designed to celebrate her body, not hide it. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like something to be corrected. She felt like something beautiful. But beauty, in her world, was always temporary. At the altar stood Adrian Whitmore, the golden heir of New York's elite real estate empire. Perfect smile, perfect posture, perfect reputation. The man who once told her she was different from the others. The man she trusted with her heart. And today, he was about to destroy it. As Father Thomas began the ceremony, Isabella's hands trembled with nervous hope. Her father, Robert Sinclair, squeezed her hand gently before placing it into Adrian's. A moment that should have felt like blessing. Instead, felt like hesitation. Adrian's grip was cold. The cathedral was silent except for the echo of distant choir music. Cameras hidden in the crowd waited for the perfect billionaire wedding moment. Isabella lifted her eyes, searching Adrian's face for comfort, but she didn't find love. She found distance, cold, detached, almost disgusted. "Adrian," she whispered. He didn't answer. Father Thomas continued, unaware of the storm forming at the altar. "We are gathered here today." "Stop!" Adrian's voice cut through the cathedral like a blade. Silence shattered instantly. Every guest froze. Isabella's breath caught. What are you doing?" Adrian stepped back from her hand as if her touch burned him. Then, slowly, he turned away from the altar, toward the crowd, toward judgment, toward destruction. He walked down the marble steps and took the microphone. A confused murmur spread through the church. Isabella stood motionless, her wedding dress suddenly feeling heavier than stone. Her mother gasped from the front row. Her father rose halfway, sensing disaster. Adrian looked back at Isabella and smiled. Not love, not warmth, cruelty, and then he spoke. "I can't do this. I can't do this, Adrian." Whitmore's words echoed through the cathedral. Like a death sentence, Isabella Sinclair felt the world tilt beneath her feet. A confused silence spread through the guests. Then whispers. Then shock, then fear. 300 powerful people, and not one of them could understand what was happening at the altar. Father Thomas froze mid-prayer. "Son, this is highly inappropriate." "Stay out of this," Adrian snapped. His voice was sharp, controlled, and disturbingly calm. He turned fully toward the crowd, gripping the microphone like he owned the room. Then his eyes slowly drifted back to Isabella, and everything in them changed. "Do you all want to know what this is?" he asked. Murmurs rose instantly. Cameras lifted higher. Isabella's lips trembled. "Adrian, please." But he didn't stop. "I told myself this marriage was worth it," he continued, pacing slowly at the altar. "The Sinclair assets, the board influence, the merger opportunity." A sharp gasp rippled through the cathedral. Isabella's father, Robert Sinclair, stepped forward. "Enough, stop this now." But Adrian only laughed. "No," he said coldly. "You stop pretending." Then he turned back and pointed directly at Isabella, at her. The word hit like a slap. "She's not what you think she is. Not what you've been sold." His voice rose, crueler now. "This is what I get in return? A lifetime tied to this." Isabella shook her head violently. "Adrian, please, don't do this here." But tears were already burning in her eyes. The guests began recording. Flashing phones lit up the cathedral like a stadium. Her humiliation was becoming entertainment. Adrian leaned into the microphone again. "I tried to convince myself I could ignore it, but I can't wake up every day next to something I don't want." The words shattered her. A sob broke from her mother. Her father looked like he might collapse, and then the cathedral. Doors slammed shut, a deafening, metallic echo thundered through the hall. Every head turned. 6 men in black suits stood at the entrance, silent, motionless, dangerous, and stepping forward between them was Lorenzo Enzo Moretti. Lorenzo Enzo Moretti didn't walk into the cathedral like a guest. He walked in like the entire building belonged to him. The silence that followed was not confusion anymore. It was fear. Real suffocating fear. Even the most powerful guests in the room suddenly felt small in their seats. Isabella Sinclair barely noticed them at first. Her world was still collapsing at the altar. Adrian's words still echoing in her chest like broken glass, but then she saw him. Enzo Moretti, a name whispered in boardrooms and criminal investigations alike. Officially a billionaire businessman. Unofficially, something far more dangerous. He moved slowly down the aisle. Every step echoed against marble like a warning. His black suit was flawless, his presence heavier than the air itself. Robert Sinclair's face went pale the moment he recognized him. "No," he whispered. "Not him." Adrian frowned, still holding the microphone. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" Enzo didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on Isabella. Not with judgment. Not with disgust, but something far deeper. Something unsettlingly intense. He stopped a few feet away from Adrian. "Move," Enzo said quietly. One word, but it carried authority that made people instinctively obey. Adrian scoffed. "This is a private ceremony." "Get out," he never finished. In a blur of motion, Enzo grabbed him by the throat and lifted him clean off the ground. A collective gasp exploded through the cathedral. Adrian's legs kicked uselessly in the air. His face turned pale as panic replaced arrogance. Enzo leaned in, a voice low and deadly calm. "You speak too much for a man who knows nothing." Then he turned his head slightly toward Isabella, and for the first time, his expression softened. "She is not yours to destroy," he said quietly. "And she never was." Adrian choked, clawing at Enzo's grip. Enzo didn't even flinch. "She is not a mistake," he continued. "She is not a flaw." Then, with a controlled motion, he threw Adrian onto the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Enzo stepped forward, finally standing before Isabella at the altar. And everything in her life changed in that moment. Isabella Sinclair couldn't move. Her body was still shaking from Adrian's humiliation. But now something entirely different had entered the space where her pain lived. Enzo Moretti stood before her, like a storm that had chosen to stop at her feet. For a moment, the entire cathedral felt frozen in time. Even the breathing of the guests seemed to disappear. Enzo looked at her closely. Not at her dress. Not at the crowd. "Only her. I've watched you," he said quietly. Isabella blinked through tears. "What?" "For a long time," he continued, voice lower now, almost dangerous in its calmness. "I've just never noticed." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the presence of him. Strong, controlled, unshakable. "I watched you walk through your life," Enzo said. "Smiling when you were ignored. Giving when you were taken for granted. Loving someone who didn't know how to value you." Isabella shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. "I don't understand." Enzo's gaze darkened, but not with anger. "With something far more intense?" "I stayed away," he admitted, "because I told myself you didn't belong in my world." A pause, but today... His eyes flicked briefly toward Adrian, still struggling on the floor. "Today I realized something." His voice sharpened slightly. "You were never the one who didn't belong." He was. Isabella's lips parted, but no words came out. Her entire reality was shifting beneath her feet. Enzo reached up slowly, but didn't touch her yet. He stopped just short, giving her space to choose. "You can walk out of here," he said, "and let them turn your pain into gossip." A beat of silence, or... He pulled a small velvet box from his coat and opened it. Inside was a ring unlike anything she had ever seen. Powerful, old, unmistakably valuable. "You can leave this place as the woman they underestimated." His eyes locked onto hers. "Or you can leave it as my wife." The cathedral didn't breathe. No one moved. No one spoke. Even Adrian, still bleeding on the marble floor, seemed to realize the world had shifted beyond his control. Isabella Sinclair stared at the ring in Enzo Moretti's hand. It wasn't just jewelry. It felt like a line being drawn between her past and whatever came next. Her heart was still aching from humiliation, but underneath it something else was rising, something unfamiliar. Strength. She looked at Enzo, then at the crowd. Whispers, phones still recording, eyes still judging. And finally, she looked at Adrian. He tried to sit up, voice weak. "Isabella, don't be stupid." But she didn't even react. For the first time in her life, his opinion didn't matter. Her voice came out calm, too calm. "What happens if I say yes?" she asked Enzo. Enzo didn't smile. He didn't pressure her. He simply answered, Then no one ever humiliates you again." A silence followed that felt heavier than thunder. Isabella inhaled slowly. Every memory of being ignored, dismissed, and broken down passed through her mind like a storm. And then she made her choice. "Yes," she said. One word. But it changed everything. A collective gasp erupted through the cathedral as Enzo slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Behind them, Adrian let out a broken laugh of disbelief. "You're insane." Enzo didn't even look at him. He turned to Isabella instead. "Now," he said softly, "you're mine." But it didn't feel like ownership. It felt like protection, like power returning to where it was always meant to be. Enzo took her hand and turned toward the aisle. "Cancel the wedding," he said coldly to the room. No one dared object. As they walked out together, the crowd parted like they were witnessing something they would never forget and never understand. Outside, sunlight hit the cathedral steps. Isabella paused for a moment, looking back at the life she was leaving behind. Then she looked forward. For the first time, she wasn't walking toward shame. She was walking toward a future where she would never be small again. And behind her, Adrian's world quietly collapsed. 6 months later, the city still whispered about that day, about the bride who disappeared from her own wedding, and the Mafia boss who took her away. But Isabella Sinclair was no longer a whisper. She was a name, a force, a woman who no longer asked for space because she took it. And standing beside her, always watching, always protecting, was Enzo Moretti. Not her savior, her equal. The end. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, power, and transformation, let us know in the comments what